took a deep breath, trying to calm his muddled thoughts. Ling's words were certainly not something that was easily taken for granted, considering Ling's long-standing relationship with Min and Ling. Accepting Min back, however, the growing feelings between them couldn't be ignored either. After a while, a small smile appeared at the corner of Orm's lips. "Is Peeling really sure about breaking up with Pimian?" he asked slowly, trying to gauge Ling's sincerity. Ling nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm sure, but please give me some time. I'll talk to Min at the right time. I promise within this week, everything will be done." Orm only muttered under his breath in response, then reached out his hand, rubbing Ling's cheek gently. "Let's go to bed. I feel sleepy already," he said in a calmer tone, trying to close this emotionally charged conversation. Ling nodded despite her expression of dissatisfaction. She knew that Orm was still skeptical and perhaps didn't fully trust her. However, she also understood that trust took time. "Good night, Peeling," Orm said as he turned his body, choosing to sleep with his back to Ling. "Good night too, Norm," Ling replied softly, though feeling restless herself. She turned over, staring at the opposite wall, her back to Orm. The silence of the night enveloped them again. Orm tried to close his eyes, but the thought of the decision he was about to make haunted him. Tears slowly fell down his cheeks, but he made no sound. An hour had passed, but Orm could not close his eyes. He lay in silence, accompanied only by the sound of the regular breathing of Ling, who slept beside him. The darkness of the night enveloped their room, but Orm's mind did not stop spinning. Restlessness and doubt made his chest tighten. He knew he had a big decision to make soon. Cautiously, Orm moved. He turned his head slightly, making sure Ling was still fast asleep. Once he was sure that there was no movement from Ling, Orm slowly got out of bed. Every movement was done very carefully so as not to make the slightest noise. His bare feet treaded on the cold floor, adding to the eerie silence. She stepped slowly towards the small table in the corner of the room, where her cell phone lay. Under the dim light emanating from the window, his hand reached for the phone in slow motion, as if it could make a scene at any moment. His heart beat faster when the phone screen lit up, illuminating his vacillating face. Standing by the table, Orm began to scroll through the screen. Contact names passed through his eyes quickly, but only one was really what he was looking for. Once he found the contact he was looking for, Orm paused for a moment. His fingers dangled over the screen, feeling the emotional weight of the decision he was about to make now. "I've decided, Phi. Thanks for helping me take care of everything." A quiet morning enveloped the city of Bangkok. Birds chirped softly, accompanying the sunlight that began to slip through the cracks in the windows. Ling woke up, blinking her eyes as the light touched her face. She moved slowly, her hands grazing the sides of the bed, searching for the warmth she used to feel there. But now it was empty. Her eyes opened wide, searching for Orm, who was no longer beside her. Curious, Ling got up from the bed, letting the blanket sag down. She stepped out of the room, descending the stairs with vigor. However, when she reached the end of the stairs, her steps halted. Her eyes narrowed, trying to ascertain the two figures sitting in the living room. They looked familiar to her. "Min?" he greeted hesitantly, confirming whether the person was really Min. Suddenly, the man turned his head and smiled warmly. "Ling, are you awake?" asked Min, getting up from the sofa and walking over. Ling didn't answer immediately. Her eyes shifted to a woman sitting next to Min. The woman's face also looked familiar. "P. Best," she said in surprise. The woman called Best immediately stood up and walked over to Ling, hugging her tightly. "Long time no see, Ling. How are you?" she asked with a friendly smile. Ling returned the hug awkwardly. "I'm fine, Fi. But why is Fi here?" she asked, still confused to see her former assistant suddenly showing up at her house with Min. Best smiled. "Min offered me a job as your assistant. I was hesitant at first, but I finally agreed, even though this offer came out of the blue," he replied. "Huh?" Ling was stunned to hear that explanation. Her eyes immediately turned to Min, asking for further explanation. "What do you mean, Min? I already have Orm as my assistant. Anyway, where's Orm now?" Ling began to feel that something was not right. Min sighed, seemingly hesitant to answer. "So it's like this. Orm resigned suddenly this morning. I also just found out from Pisang, who asked for my help in finding a replacement." "No way." Ling refused to believe it. Her mind in turmoil, she rushed to the kitchen, hoping Orm was still there. However, when she arrived, the kitchen was empty. With her heart pounding, Ling ran to Orm's room. Her body suddenly fainted when she saw that the room was empty. There were no more Orm's belongings there. The Min who followed Ling immediately held her up before she fell to the floor. "Now you believe, right?" Ling bit her lip, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Why did he leave without saying anything to me?" Tears began to pool at the corners of her eyes. Her heart rebelled, still unable to accept this reality. Last night they still slept together, still had time to talk to each other, but now everything seemed to have disappeared. Min let out a long breath, still trying to calm Ling down. "I don't know, Ling. You might be able to get a clearer answer from P-Saint." Ling nodded slowly, taking a deep breath, trying to contain his emotions. "I need to see P-Saint," she said in a firm tone, quickly walking towards the desk to retrieve her car keys. "Ling, calm down." Min tried to stop her. "You can meet P-Saint later this afternoon. He still has business this morning," Min continued in a low voice. Ling stopped her steps, taking a deep breath once more, trying to control herself. Wearily, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at her phone. Her fingers began to move in search of Orm's contacts, trying to call him. However, there was no answer. With quick steps, Ling entered the CH3 company building. Today, the atmosphere felt a little different. Unlike usual, the building was not filled with fans waiting for her. Ling considered herself lucky enough to not have to face the crowds. However, that wasn't really her main focus. Right now, her mind was only occupied by one thing: Orm. After arriving at the door of the saint's room, Ling unhesitatingly grabbed the doorknob and knocked gently before opening it. "Sawadika, P-Saint," Ling greeted politely. Saint, who was sitting behind his desk, immediately greeted Ling's arrival with his usual friendly smile. "Have a seat, Ling," he said, inviting Ling to sit on the chair directly opposite him. Without much ado, Ling sat down and looked at Saint with a serious look. "P-Saint, can you tell me why Orm resigned?" she asked directly, without masking her concern. Saint sighed softly before answering in a calm voice. "Orm said that he wants to focus on his education and his family business." That's the reason why he resigned from his position as your assistant. Ling's eyes looked a little teary, but she tried to hold back her emotions. Did Orm just say that? Phi, this is too sudden. In fact, he didn't say anything to me yesterday, Ling replied, her voice sounding heavy. Saint looked at Ling with understanding. Yes, Ling, that's all he said. Phi was also surprised when Orm came this morning and tendered his resignation. Phi thought you had discussed it with him beforehand, so Phi can only respect his decision. Ling was silent for a moment, holding her breath. Even though her chest felt tight hearing that explanation, every word that came out of Saint's mouth made it harder for her to accept the fact that Orm had really left without a word to her. After a few moments of silence, Saint continued, as for Orm's replacement, it has been decided that Best, your former assistant, will return to work with you. It was Ming who suggested this, since you and Best don't need to adapt anymore. Ling nodded slowly, though her mind was still filled with unanswered questions. Yes, Phi, I know. Well then, thank you for the information, Ling said as she stood up from her chair. She bowed slightly as a sign of respect before turning to leave the room. However, Ling did not leave immediately. She sat on one of the chairs in the hallway and let her mind wander. Saint's words kept ringing in her ears, but her heart still refused to accept the fact. The reasons Orm gave did make sense, focusing on education and the family business, but it all felt so awkward to Ling. Orm, who had always been open and honest with her, had suddenly disappeared without a word. A deep sense of sadness and loss enveloped Ling's heart. She looked down, staring at the floor blankly, trying to understand why Orm had left so suddenly. A man named Min stepped into a vintage restaurant that seemed quiet and not too crowded. He looked around, his eyes searching for someone. When his gaze found the person he was looking for, a warm smile was etched on his lips. With slow steps, Min walked closer to a woman sitting in the corner of the restaurant. Without hesitation, she blindfolded the woman from behind. Guess who? Min whispered softly in the woman's ear. P. Min, the woman replied, her voice sounding full of certainty. Min smiled, lowered her hand, and sat on the chair next to the woman. How did you know it was me? Norm, she asked in a curious tone. Orm looked at Min for a moment, then smiled slightly. I've known Phi for several years. Of course I know her by heart, he replied confidently. However, the cheerful expression on Orm's face suddenly faded when his eyes caught something unusual on Min's face. Min, what's wrong with your face? He asked as he gently cupped Min's cheek, scrutinizing the obvious wounds. Min smiled, as if trying to calm Orm down. He touched Orm's hand that was still holding his face. It's just a small wound. Nang. I fell while doing research, he said softly, trying to sound convincing. But Orm looked at him doubtfully. Is Phi telling the truth? He asked again. This wound doesn't look like a fall, but more like someone hit me. Min chuckled softly, trying to break the ice. Who would hit me? You know, I don't like to get involved in fights. Min. Orm scowled and hit Min's cheek gently, making Min pretend to grimace in pain. Oh, you hit my wound, Min teased in a tone of feigned pain. Min is a pain in the ass, Orm retorted with a pouty face. I believe it this time, but if I see Phi like this again, I want to know who dared to hit Phi. I'll hit her back, threatened Orm as he made a fist as if preparing to fight. Min chuckled at Orm's reaction, then lightly pinched Orm's cheek. Oh hoo, that sounds really scary. After their laughter died down, Min became more serious. Okay, focus on your problem now. He looked at Orm with a thoughtful gaze. So you really quit being Kunling's assistant? Orm nodded slowly, his gaze downcast. Yes, I decided to resign. Why? Did Kunling do something that made you uncomfortable? Asked Min in a concerned tone. That's not it. Orm spoke softly, still bowing his head. I just want to forget my feelings for Peeling. Working with her now, after she's with Peemin, is too painful for me. Tears began to flow down Orm's cheeks, causing Min to rush over and embrace him. He rubbed Orm's back gently, trying to calm him down. Calm down, Nong. I know this must be painful, Min said in a soft, empathetic voice. Orm rested his head on Min's chest, letting his cries out. I can't take it anymore, Fi. Maybe I was too hopeful. When I knew from the start that I couldn't be with Peeling, he said between tears. Min could only stay silent, hugging Orm tightly while soothing her heart that was also hurt by Orm's fragile state. After a while, Orm released the hug and looked at Min with tears still flowing. I can no longer meet Peeling. If I meet her, it will only put her in danger. Hearing those words, Min's eyebrows rose. Danger? What do you mean? Orm looked nervous, like he had just realized that he had said too much. He tried to change the topic. I mean, Peeling would be threatened by her rabid fans who wanted to know more about her life. The blasphemy on social media is also pouring in for me, Peeling and Peemin. Min frowned, not entirely convinced. What was the real reason you stopped to protect Ling? Orm shook his head slowly. Not entirely. My main reason was to get over my feelings for Peeling, he replied in an increasingly soft voice. But if Ling was really in danger, shouldn't you have stayed by her side? Min tried to convince. Orm looked down again. Peeling has Peemin who can take good care of her. Min sighed softly. TSK. Min will only destroy Ling, he muttered softly, almost inaudibly. Huh? Orm gave Min a puzzled look when he heard a glimpse of Min's words. What did Fi say? Min smiled, trying to hide the doubts that plagued her mind. I mean, I'm not sure if Min can take care of Ling like he should. Didn't you say he abandoned Ling once? Orm smiled a little, though he looked tired. I'm sure Peemin can protect Peeling. Min could only sigh. Well, Fi respects your decision. His hand gently brushed Orm's hair, while inside Min still held unspoken worries. Thank you for taking me home, Fi, Orm said softly, his voice sounding full of gratitude. He smiled warmly as he looked at Min standing beside him. Min returned the smile calmly, then shook her head gently. No problem, it's my duty, Min said softly, her voice full of care and sincerity. Orm stopped right in front of his door, looking back at Min for a moment before taking a step forward. Suddenly, however, Orm turned around and, without hesitation, hugged Min back. The hug was tight yet warm, like an embrace that was hard to put into words. Thank you, Peemin, for today and all the time you spent with me. Min smiled a little as she returned the hug gently. Her large hand gently rubbed the top of Orm's head, a gesture of affection and care. If you need anything, you can just tell Fi. Fi will always be there to help you. Orm released his embrace and looked up at Min with sparkling eyes, his lips in a wide smile. Thank you very much, Peemin, he said sincerely. However, The warm atmosphere suddenly changed when the sound of the house door opening from behind them. Orm and Ming both turned around, finding Orm's parents standing in the doorway. Tanakorn, Orm's father, smiled warmly at them, while Mei Koi stood beside him with a loving look in her eyes. Sawadikan Fu, Sawadikan Mei. Ming greeted respectfully, bowing slightly as a form of courtesy. Ming, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. Tanakorn exclaimed in a happy tone. Are you well, child? Ming smiled politely, replying kindly, I'm doing well. Kung Fu. Just very busy with my studies so that I can graduate quickly. Tanakorn nodded in satisfaction. Thank goodness, you two are still in a good relationship, right? Our relationship is fine. Kung Fu, Ming replied calmly, without a hint of hesitation. However, just then her cell phone suddenly rang, drawing her attention. Ming reached into her pants pocket and glanced at the notification that appeared on the screen. She then looked at Orm and his parents with apology in her eyes. Looks like I have to excuse myself to go home now. I have some business to attend to. Tanakorn nodded in understanding. Alright, stop by next time if you have time. Ming smiled gently. Yes, Kung Fu. I will stop by more often in the future. Then be careful on the road, Piming, said Orm as he waved his hand gently at Ming. See you soon, Ming replied, waving back before bowing slightly to salute Orm's parents. After that, he walked towards his car that was parked nearby. Orm stood in front of the house, waving until Ming's car slowly disappeared from sight. After that, he turned to his parents who were still standing in the doorway. Mei Koi stretched out her hand and gently took Orm by the arm. Let's go inside, son. Yes, Kun Mei, Orm replied as he followed his mother into the house, carrying the large suitcase he had been carrying. Tanakorn looked at her daughter with slightly raised eyebrows. Why did you come home with a suitcase? Unusual. Orm let out a long breath before answering. Orm has resigned from the job as personal assistant. Orm wants to stay here for a few days first. Mei Koi smiled gently, touching Orm's shoulder affectionately. You can stay there as long as you want, son. This is your home too. Tanakorn, who had been silent, suddenly spoke in a serious tone. Resigning? Is it because of the problems that befell the two of you? His voice sounded stern, making Orm look down. Orm did not answer immediately. He could only look down, finding it hard to explain. Tanakorn spoke again, his voice no less stern than before. Fu has seen everything about you and that artist. Your women and kissing in a public place, that's not appropriate. Forgive Orm, Kung Fu, but it wasn't intentional. Orm replied softly, trying to explain. Tanakorn looked at Orm sharply. Don't tell me you like that artist? But that artist chose to get back together with her former lover. Orm remained silent, his heart heavy. He knew his father would never understand his feelings for Ling. How could you fall in love with that woman? Same-sex love will not bring happiness, Tanakorn emphasized, his eyes looking straight at Orm, waiting for a response. Before Orm could answer, Mei Koi, who had been listening, tried to intervene. There's nothing wrong with same-sex love, Tanakorn. They can also bring happiness. Tanakorn snorted, not accepting his wife's argument. Bring happiness? But that artist clearly hurt Orm. Fu told you. That woman is unstable. And look, she went back to her ex. Orm remained silent. Tears were about to spill from his eyes. but he tried hard to hold them back. Tanakorn continued, Min is the best choice for you. Orm, she can accept you for who you are. Your relationship is still fine even though Min must have known the news that spread. Orm felt even more pressured by his father's gaze. He just didn't dare fight his father when arguing like this. Don't be too hard on Orm. He is an adult and can choose what is best for him, Meikoi said in a soft voice, trying to calm her husband who still looked tense. Her gaze was loving, hoping that her words would ease Tanakorn's anger. Tanakorn let out a long breath, his voice softening slightly though still sounding firm. I only want the best for Orm. I raised Orm with love, so I want someone who can love Orm sincerely, just like we love him. Meikoi nodded slowly, understanding. I know. You only want the best for Orm, but remember that he also has the right to choose his own path. Meikoi looked gently at Orm, who stood silently beside them, looking tired after the long conversation. Meikoi touched Orm's arm gently. Since it's getting late, you'd better get some rest, son. Orm nodded slowly. Yes, Kunmei. His voice sounded weak, but he tried to smile slightly. He raised his head slightly to look at his mother and father before turning and walking towards his room. Once in the room, Orm immediately threw himself onto the bed. The soft mattress seemed unable to alleviate the exhaustion that enveloped him, both physically and emotionally. He stared blankly at the ceiling of the room, his mind filled with the various problems that came one after another into her life. Why is it so hard to find happiness now? Muttered Orm softly, barely audible in the silence of the night. His chest felt tight, as if the weight he had been holding back had finally hit him hard. The tears were almost falling, but Orm tried to hold them back. He didn't want to cry again tonight. However, the immense fatigue, both physical and mental, slowly led him to close his eyes. A moment later, his body began to sink into the silence of the night, taking him slowly towards a dreamland that should provide some escape from the reality that was crushing him.